Hello, HIN 620. This is Chapter 3. Chapter 3 goes over a lot of different ways you can use the select statement and how you use the various keywords that go along with it, the from, where, order, limit. This is stuff you've already hit on in some of the exercises you've already done, but I figured it can't hurt to go through some of the other ones that I see frequently. And one of my favorite ones is the concatenation, because especially I deal a lot with databases that have names in them, and it's usually a bad idea to store the names as the with the first name and the last name together in the same cell. That's usually never a good idea. So you store them in separate cells, but frequently when you want them to to be selected upon and see the data, you want to see them together. So for this command, I'm going to concatenate the last name and then comma first name, and then just for the heck of it, I thought I'd throw in a parenthesis and then the address, member email address, and then the close paren from the member database. And so if we run that, we can see that the output is the last name, first name, parentheses, email. And so that can be very handy when you're trying to make your output look a little bit nicer, more presentable, rather than in a specific database format. Another cool thing that we can add on to the end of that is, well, first let's look at the entire table. It only has 3 values in it, but we have a Jane Smith, a John Smith, and a Janice Jones. So if I go back here and I add something on here, a where clause that says where the first name is like this, and this is something that if you're not familiar with, this is a good time to understand it, is like is not equals, it's like, and it means that it's going to start with JA and then have any number of characters after that. So I would have Jack or Jane or Jasmine, something like that. If I thought it ended in JA, I would say anything before that and then JA. So the percent sign is sort of a wild card key, and that's something you can easily play around with and see how it works. So if I say run this command here, adding this where on there, that I should get only Jane and Janice, because they're the only ones whose first names start with that. So let's run it, and sure enough, all I get is Jane and Janice. So that can come in handy, definitely. One thing that the chapter went into is commands like left and right. Basically, you can manipulate strings however you want to, and that can come in very handy too for various reasons. And like, for example, this one, say I only wanted to see the first 4 letters of someone's last name. I would do that, and then I see Smith, and Joan. Again, it depends on the situation, but that could come in very handy to do lefts and rights and mid and all kinds of things. Anything you can think of that you can do to a string, there will be a keyword for that. Another type of select that'll come in very handy is selecting distinct, which means I want to select only the rows that don't repeat this name. In other words, in my database, I have Smith, Smith, and Jones. So if I only wanted to see the names that were different in the table, and in other words, I want to see Jones and I want to see Smith, and I don't really care what the first name is or anything, I just want to know how many people of each last name we have, I would use the distinct command. And if I run that, I'll get Smith and I'll get Jones. And another good one is using the in keyword. Capitalize that. it it allows you to search in a group of values. So if you know that your member ID is somewhere, it's specifically 1, 3, and 5 or something like that, that's what you put in there instead of just saying where member ID is, less than 2 and greater than 4 and this and that and the other thing. You can just actually physically put in the values here. That comes in very handy when you're actually writing code that's generating SQL statements. Because sometimes you know all the IDs that you want and you're going to make a list of them and then just put that in this in clause. So if I run that, I should get the first and third member, as you see here. And if we add a statement onto that, order by, another cool thing that comes in very handy. This is more a presentation thing because it doesn't really give you any different data. It just will make it look different. So if I wanted the results of the last command to be sorted by the last name, so in other words, instead of Smith Jones, it would be Jones Smith, I say order by last name, and it's implied that it's ascending, but you can also put that in there to make it explicit. So now I have the 3 and the 1 where Jones and Smith is first. So that's some good examples of different ways you'd use different keywords and select commands. There are many examples in this chapter, many examples using arithmetic. I would highly advise when you're using arithmetic to use as many parentheses as you want to, just to make sure that doing it in the doing the math in the correct order that you want it to. There was other logic like between and stuff like that. Basically, if you want to select data and you want to do it in a certain way, again, there's a keyword for doing that. So next we'll move on to a couple of the exercises, and we can use some of these new tricks we've learned. So let's go to exercise 7, where we're going to write a select statement to combine the vendor names. So it wants it in a specific format with the last name, a comma, space, and the first name. So let's start with a select, and we'll call it concat vendor contact last name and first name. It's kind of like the example I did before, where it's a space and then a comma, and we do that, and we can call that from vendors. Now this isn't the full assignment, but to just see how that works. And okay, so it gave me all the last name, first name in the vendor database, and that returned 122 rows. So, but this says also sort it by last name and then first name in ascending sequence. So let's add that on there. So we're going to order by, and you'll notice one thing that's very cool about this is that you can, it doesn't capitalize them, but you can see this type ahead thing because it's kind of thinking for you, that it pops up as you're typing it. That can come in very handy if you don't like to type a whole lot. So we're going to sort it by the last name and then first name, And so let's try what that gives us. So once we've done the first three parts, we want to go and do the last part, which is only including the last names that begin with A, B, C, or E. So there are actually a number of ways to do this. You can use do the like command. You could do it 4 times if you wanted to, like A, %, like B, %, and just do that 4 times. Or you can try to take some like a mathematical shortcut, I guess you could call it, and say where the last name is less than D, meaning anything that, all the way up to CZ something will be included in that. And then you say and, so you get to use one of the conjunctions here, and then you can say vendor last name, like E. So this is saying where any last name is less than D, so anything that begins with A, B, or C, and then also include anything that starts with an E. So let's see what results that gives us. So interestingly enough, and this wasn't intentional, it gives us the wrong answer. It gives us no rows at all. And so obviously something is wrong here in my where command. And lo and behold, it was because the and should be an or, because a name can't be both A, B, and C and E. It has to be one or the other. So it's either less than D or it's like E. So if we run this again now, we should get the 41 rows that the book says we should get. So that's a good example using all these different types of keywords for select command. So hopefully you can figure out the rest of them as you wish.